Thank you, Fahid, for the introduction, and of course to you and Ethics and Technology in general for organizing this really lovely event and for having me. It's been really great to listen to the other speakers talking about such important topics in the tech space. So I'm happy to be here and very excited to talk killer robots with you all. So yeah, as mentioned already, my name is Farah Bogani and I'm the project officer for the campaign to stop killer robots. We are a growing global coalition of civil society organizations working together to prevent digital dehumanization, build a better society, and protect humanity by advocating for new international law on autonomy in weapon systems. We didn't expect a campaign to stop killer robots to be needed in the world, but it is. Our lives are increasingly affected by the growing influences of computer processing and algorithmic decision-making. Emerging technologies that prioritize precision, efficiency, and speed are presented as silver bullets to the problems our society faces. However, there are serious consequences to removing the human understanding of context and nuance from the structures we live in and the challenges we encounter. These technological developments warn us to hold on to the fundamentals of humanity and to value each other, not through calculation, but through understanding. And if there is anything that the pandemic has taught us in the last year and a half, in addition to wearing your masks and washing your hands, folks, it's that there is power in human connection and empathy. So it is very concerning to see technological developments where weapon systems are increasingly enabled to use computer programming and sensors to identify and select targets over wider areas and for longer periods of time. Autonomy in weapons means less direct human engagement, less understanding of what is happening in an attack, and less clarity for who would be accountable for a mistake. Autonomy in weapon systems means we're getting closer to machines making decisions over whom to kill. Systems that function in this way present moral, ethical, humanitarian, operational, and legal challenges, and they threaten international security and stability. They would erode our commitment to human dignity, erode respect for existing legal rules and fundamental rights, further weaken accountability for harms and conflict, and negatively shape our relationship with automated decision-making across all areas of society. If we build and use technologies that are capable of holding this ultimate authority over life and death, decision-making, then what does that mean about the other technologies we will allow to be used in our societies? Or how those technologies end up being deployed, in what situations, and against which people. Major tech companies such as Amazon, Microsoft, Palantir, and others have been working with the United States Department of Defense, military, and other various government agencies as the US looks to integrate artificial intelligence into its security and defense capabilities. The most notable example is Project Maven, which used machine learning algorithms to parse through a significant amount of video footage collected by surveillance drones, identify patterns on the ground, and help pick targets, including buildings and other targets, quote unquote, of interest for the military. Project Maven was picked up by companies such as Microsoft, Amazon, Clarify, Anduril, and Palantir after Google dropped the project following protests by thousands of Google employees. Laura Nolan and Liz O'Sullivan are tech experts who actually joined the campaign to stop killer robots after walking out on their companies, Google and Clarify respectively, once it became clear that their companies were involved in Project Maven. They were expected to develop and refine projects that they were already working on to improve target identification for the US government's drone program. Such contracts are becoming commonplace as DoD are turning to big and small tech companies to help build their AI capabilities. For example, awarding Palantir, best known for working with ICE, a contract to build and deploy an AI system to analyze combat zones in real time, or using geospatial AI from Orbital Insight to improve and accelerate the tracking, targeting, and capturing or killing of subjects of interest, or sourcing Anduril's Lattice AI platform with sensor fusion, machine learning, and mesh networking capabilities to control autonomous systems. It's concerning to see the growing militarization of the tech sector. People whose expertise lies in coding, programming, software development, engineering, and other related fields are being drawn into a militarized space and expected to create or contribute to the development of systems that target human beings in the name of national and international security. In October 2020, a DoD official stated that, quote unquote, data is the ammunition of the future, in reference to the department's strategy to organize collected data for faster decision-making. If data is considered the ammunition, then what are the systems that collect and process the data, systems created and developed by tech workers? There is a need to think about the long-term moral and ethical implications of technology, its end use, and how certain products could be used outside of their intended purpose. Technologies from facial recognition to cloud computing can play a role in autonomous weapon systems. And technology can and should be used for good, but its dual-use nature for civilian, military, policing, and border security applications indicates an urgent need to regulate and establish limitations on what this technology is used for, when, where, and how. So, although many tech companies have released AI ethical principles and frameworks or have been engaged in developing them, many of these principles are just that, principles. They lack the monitoring and enforcement mechanisms needed to prevent weapons development. At best, they signal a recognition of the need to consider ethical development of AI. At worst, they are a smokescreen distracting from the real and urgent need to address the risks and harms posed by these technologies. What we need is much stronger than just principles. We need regulation. This is why the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots is calling for the negotiation of a new international treaty to prohibit autonomous weapons, prevent targeting of humans, and maintain meaningful human control over the use of force. We need to question the value that we are placing on innovation and technological development over human rights, human dignity, and human life. The serious ethical implications of how technology is being designed, developed, and used today will have a significant, long-lasting impact on our societies tomorrow. One such example of long-lasting impact is how technologies can entrench inequality, systemic oppression, and structures of white supremacy. We have already seen the consequences of algorithmic bias in decision-making processes in other applications. Predictive policing reflects systemic racial bias through false positives, resulting in disproportionate arrests of Black and Latino people. Recidivism assessments, like the Correctional Offender Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions, or COMPASS system, are also plagued with false positives, identifying twice as many recidivist risks amongst Black offenders compared to white offenders. Algorithmic credit scoring further disadvantages poor, Black, Indigenous, and Latina applicants, preventing them from reaching economic security. Clinical algorithms used in the US healthcare system to predict healthcare risks selected more white patients to receive additional medical care over Black patients who also required extra care. An AI recruiting system developed by Amazon replicated the biases of existing hiring practices, screening out women by parsing text and looking for keywords that would identify an applicant as female. These are all examples of algorithms that make decisions for us, sometimes with deadly consequences. These algorithms don't account for people's real lived experiences of racism, gender discrimination, ableism, classism, and other discriminations. Instead, like a mirror, they reflect the biases that we have formed throughout history and the enduring legacy of discriminatory practices. Such biases are now being built into the systems we create, regardless of whether we meant to or not, and therefore they risk perpetuating and exacerbating these existing inequalities. So it becomes particularly scary when you think about giving weapon systems that kind of power to not only make the decision to kill, but to make that decision based on what it processes as a data point, but what we see as human, that is, people's identities, behaviors, and situations. Autonomous weapons risk contributing to the systemic inequalities and discrimination that underpins our societies today. These weapon systems rely on categorizing people based on specific models of what they expect a target to be. Determining a quote-unquote legitimate target, such as a combatant or insurgent, requires the development of a profile that essentializes and fixes people's identities. However, the very nature of war and conflict environments is dynamic and unpredictable. So understanding nuances and critically analyzing context is essential to a human application of the laws of war. that is International Humanitarian Law, or IHL. IHL contains legal requirements for distinction, proportionality, and precautions against harming and attacking civilians. For example, autonomous weapons could misidentify an injured combatant or one who lays down their weapon to surrender as a legitimate target. In both instances, their combatant status would change to a protected category under international humanitarian law. I mean, other situations where this could happen would be, autonomous weapons could also fail at distinguishing between a combatant, a health worker, and a humanitarian aid worker if they are all wearing helmets without any names or emblems to represent who they are. Autonomous weapons that are deployed in conflict zones would not see a child and neighbors collecting scrap metal to sell. What it processes is a military-aged male surrounded by other military-aged males, dressed similarly to an insurgent and holding a metal object. Autonomous weapons used at a patrolled border would not see a person seeking asylum or fleeing from persecution. Rather, they calculate information collected through sensors to determine the level of threat to national security. And these border patrol systems do already exist to some extent, albeit not entirely autonomous, such as along the US-Mexico border, the border between Israel and Palestinian territories, and South Korea's border with the demilitarized zone. Autonomous weapons do not see anything because they are not human. They are machines, and so lack the capacity for human empathy, understanding, judgment, interpretation, and responsibility. They would escalate digital dehumanization by erasing people's humanity and replacing them with a series of ones and zeros. There are also larger questions to consider around the accountability gap. When these systems harm people that they weren't supposed to, or execute an unplanned attack due to a bug in the software, or get hacked, who would be accountable for that? Will it be the command that gives the order to use the technology, the military that chose to purchase these systems, the tech company that sold the hardware or software, the software developers that program the system, the engineers that built it, or the system itself? The question of where responsibility and accountability lies when autonomous weapons make mistakes is blurry at best, much less how AI and software programs even begin to fit into international humanitarian law. Spoiler alert, they don't. But this accountability question, it's made even fuzzier still by issues of transparency, such as the black box problem that AI presents. Even if someone could be held accountable, the variables of how that weapon system made that decision may never be fully understood and therefore cannot be appropriately explained. At the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, these are the kind of concerns that keep us up at night. So to that end, we are seeking a new legally binding international treaty to address the urgent threat of autonomy in weapon systems. The treaty would apply to systems that use machine analysis of sensor information to automatically select and engage targets, such that a human operator does not determine specifically where, when, or against what force is applied. The treaty will also establish safeguards to protect humanity by rejecting autonomous killing by machines, drawing a red line against targeting humans, countering digital dehumanization, protecting human rights and human dignity, and maintaining responsibility and accountability through meaningful human control. As the development and use of autonomous weapons poses a threat to our humanity, we must draw a line on building and giving these systems the power to make decisions to target people. Because what does it say about us as human beings if we let other human beings be harmed on the basis of data points collected and processed by a machine or an algorithm? All of us today participating in this conference have the privilege of being safe now from autonomous weapons. But these systems wouldn't just be used in conflict zones. They could easily be employed in other contexts, such as policing, protesting, and border control. As a result, the movement to stop killer robots includes everyone working to build a society in which technology is developed and used to promote peace, justice, human rights, equality, and respect for law. Our movement includes activists, academics, faith communities, international institutions, tech companies and tech workers, youth and student groups, government representatives, political leaders, veterans, and many others. I mean, I could really go on. But The point is that together, we are all working towards a world that rejects the automation of killing and instead promotes the principle of human control over emerging technologies that affect our lives, livelihoods, and relations with each other. So what can you do? If you are a tech worker, you can support the call for new international law on autonomy in weapon systems and make a public pledge not to contribute to their development. You can also hold your peers, company, and industry accountable for the contracts they choose to engage in, research that is being undertaken, the customers they're working with, and the investors they have. You can advocate for more responsible and ethical practices in the development of technology in your industry. And regardless of whether you are a tech worker, you can get in touch with your representatives to let them know that the United States should support new international law prohibiting and regulating autonomous weapons to ensure meaningful human control over the use of force. You can sign our global petition calling on governments to stop targeting humans and add your voice to the movement. You can also become a member of the campaign to stop killer robots and spread the message amongst your communities and countries. Right now, we have an opportunity to protect humanity in the present and in the future by preventing this widespread use of autonomous weapons. And at the end of the day, the most powerful thing that we can do is to act by speaking up and telling our governments that we want a world that is just like us, human. Thank you, everyone, for listening to my presentation today, and to Ethics in Technology again for hosting. Please visit our website for more information or get in touch with me at farah@stopkillerrobots.org if you want to learn more about the campaign to stop killer robots, how to get involved, become a member, and join our #TeamHumanMovement. We look forward to stopping killer robots with you.